It was a cold, gray afternoon when the city sidewalks were filled with people hurrying past each other, eyes glued to their phones, hearts locked behind invisible walls. Among the rushing crowd stood an old woman, frail, trembling, her white hair tangled by the wind. Her coat was worn thin, her shoes barely held together, and in her shaky hand, she clutched a faded map. She looked lost, desperately lost, but no one stopped. Some glanced at her, then turned away. Others walked around her as if she didn't exist. The city, loud and alive, had no time for an old stranger who didn't fit in. Then came a boy, young, black, maybe 15, carrying a torn backpack and a bag of groceries. He noticed her standing by the lamppost, confusion in her eyes. While everyone else ignored her, he hesitated, torn between the world's indifference and his own compassion. Finally, he stepped forward and asked softly, "Ma'am, are you okay?" The woman looked up, tears welling in her wrinkled eyes, whispering that she couldn't find her way home. The boy smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll help you." What he didn't know, what no one could have guessed, was that this simple act of kindness would change his entire life. Because the lost old woman everyone ignored wasn't just a helpless stranger. She was a billionaire, hidden behind the disguise of poverty, searching not for her home, but for a heart kind enough to help her find it. The city was alive with the usual rhythm of chaos: car, horns blaring, people rushing past one another, neon signs flashing promises no one had time to read. It was one of those afternoons when everyone seemed to be in a hurry to be somewhere, yet no one seemed to notice the world around them. In the middle of that restless movement stood an old woman, frail and weary, clutching a faded handbag and an old folded map. Her silver hair fluttered in the biting wind, her face creased with confusion and sadness. She looked around, her eyes scanning faces that blurred past her, hoping someone would stop, someone would care. But people didn't stop for faces like hers anymore. She was invisible to them, just another stranger on the street, a shadow that didn't matter. She tried to speak a few times, her voice barely louder than the sound of the traffic, asking if anyone knew where Maplewood Lane was, but no one answered. Some looked away deliberately, pretending they hadn't heard her. Others avoided eye contact completely, speeding up as they passed. A man in a suit brushed by her shoulder and muttered under his breath about people blocking the sidewalk. A young woman, earbuds in, sidestepped her without even glancing up. The old woman sighed, staring at the crumpled map as if it could guide her more faithfully than any person could. Her hands trembled, and a small tear rolled down her cheek. The day was growing colder, and the city's lights flickered to life one by one, but none of them brought warmth. A few blocks away, a boy walked home from the grocery store. He was about 15, tall for his age, with dark skin and eyes that carried both innocence and understanding. His clothes were worn but clean, his shoes slightly torn at the edges, and his backpack had patches that he'd sewn himself. His name was Malik. He lived with his mother and younger sister in a small apartment at the edge of town. Life hadn't been easy for them. His mother worked 2 jobs, and Malik often helped however he could, running errands, doing odd jobs, and making sure his little sister never went hungry. Despite everything, he had a kindness about him that no hardship could take away. He believed that doing good didn't need a reason, that sometimes helping others was just what decent people did. As Malik crossed the street, he noticed her. The old woman was standing near the bus stop, clutching the map close to her chest, looking lost in a sea of strangers. For a moment, he thought about walking past. He was tired, and his mother was waiting for him to bring home groceries, but something inside him told him to stop. Maybe it was the way she looked, small and fragile, or maybe it was the loneliness in her eyes. Whatever it was, he couldn't ignore it. He slowed down, watching her struggle to read the map under a flickering streetlight. He hesitated. Around him, people kept moving, their faces blank, their pace unbroken. He wondered how many had already seen her, how many had looked away because helping would take too much time. He knew that feeling, being overlooked, being invisible to people who thought your existence didn't matter. He took a deep breath and stepped closer. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said gently. The woman turned, startled at first, then relieved to see someone had finally noticed her. "Are you okay? You look a little lost." Her lips quivered as she nodded weakly. I'm trying to find my way," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought this street led to Maplewood Lane, but I must have taken a wrong turn." Malik glanced at the map, the paper so worn it was barely readable. He recognized the name. Maplewood was a long walk from here, maybe 2 bus stops away. "You're a bit far from it," he said, smiling softly, "but I can show you the way if you'd like." The woman looked at him with disbelief. "You would do that?" she asked, her eyes glistening. "You don't even know me." Malik shrugged. "You don't have to know someone to help them," he said. "Everyone gets lost sometimes." The woman's lips curved into a faint smile. It had been a long time since anyone had said something kind to her without hesitation. They began walking together, slowly, as the city buzzed around them. Malik carried her small bag so she wouldn't have to struggle. As they walked, he asked her where she had come from, but she spoke very little, just said she had been visiting someone and lost her way. Malik didn't push for details. He simply kept walking beside her, making sure she was safe. He noticed the way people stared, some with confusion, others with quiet judgment. A few whispered as they passed. A poor boy walking an old, shabby-looking woman down the street, Malik ignored them all. To him, she wasn't a stranger to be avoided. She was someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone who needed a hand. The woman noticed his silence and glanced at him. "You remind me of someone," she said softly. "Someone who used to help others without asking for anything back." Malik smiled, embarrassed. "My mom says kindness is free, so we should spend it a lot," he said, and she laughed quietly for the first time that day. They reached a bus stop where Malik told her she could catch a bus directly to Maplewood Lane. He checked the schedule, posted on the side, and saw that the next one was still 20 minutes away. "It's getting cold," he said. "Would you like some tea?" "There's a small cafe just down the corner." The woman hesitated, but the warmth in his voice made her nod. They sat in the cafe, steam rising from 2 cups of tea. The woman's hands shook as she lifted her cup, and Malik pretended not to notice. She asked him about school, about his family, and he answered politely, never once complaining about his struggles. He even made her laugh when he told her how his little sister tried to cook pancakes once, and ended up setting off the smoke alarm. By the time they returned to the bus stop, the woman's eyes had softened. She looked at Malik with a strange expression, a mix of gratitude and curiosity, as though she was seeing something more than just a boy. "You've been very kind to me," she said, "more than most would be." Malik shrugged again, smiling shyly. "It's nothing, ma'am. You just looked like you needed help. That's all." The bus arrived and Malik helped her climb the steps, making sure she found a seat near the window. As she sat down, she kept her gaze on him, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say more. Malik waved lightly, ready to leave, never realizing that this small act, this one moment of compassion, was about to change the course of his life forever. The old woman sat quietly in her seat as the bus rolled through the dimly lit streets, the soft hum of the engine blending with the rhythmic tapping of rain against the window. She kept glancing at the boy walking beside her before the bus departed, his smile lingering in her thoughts long after he disappeared into the crowd. There had been something pure about him, something she hadn't seen in a long time, kindness that expected nothing in return. When she finally reached her stop near Maplewood Lane, she felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest, not from the tea he had bought her, but from the simple fact that someone had cared enough to help. The next day, Malik woke up early, as he always did. The sun had barely risen, and the small apartment was filled with the smell of breakfast his mother was preparing before heading to work. Malik helped his little sister tie her shoelaces, packed her lunch, and then picked up his old backpack. He didn't have much, but he was proud of what he had earned through honesty and hard work. His mother always told him that being kind didn't cost anything, even when the world wasn't kind in return. That morning, as he left for school, he thought about the old woman and hoped she had reached home safely. A few days passed, and Malik continued with his usual routines, part-time work, helping his sister with homework. Life was the same, quiet and steady, but every now and then, he found himself remembering her trembling hands and soft voice. He wondered what her story was, why she had been wandering the streets alone, and why no one else had helped her. But then he reminded himself that he hadn't helped her for answers. He had helped her because it was the right thing to do. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, the old woman sat in her grand mansion surrounded by silence. The tall windows overlooked a vast garden, and the marble floors echoed faintly as she walked. Her name was Eleanor Graysana, billionaire widow known to few and seen by even fewer. For years, she had lived in solitude, her fortune hidden behind high gates and closed doors. She had no children, no close relatives, and no one she could truly call family. Money had bought her everything except warmth. It had given her walls, not hearts. People had always smiled at her for what she owned, not for who she was. So she had set out that day dressed as a poor, lost old woman to see if kindness still existed in the world. Eleanor had been disappointed or pushed aside, treated as invisible, until Malik, that boy's gentle voice and honest eyes, had reminded her of the man she once loved, who had built his fortune from nothing, and believed that humanity mattered more than wealth. She couldn't shake the memory of Malik's words. "You don't have to know someone to help them." They replayed in her mind like a soft echo. A few days later, Eleanor decided she wanted to see him again. She asked her driver to take her to the same neighborhood where she had met him. It took some searching, but soon she spotted him near a small grocery store, stacking boxes outside. He was working hard, sweat beading on his forehead, his movements steady and focused. She watched him for a moment before stepping out of the car. Malik looked up, surprised to see the same old woman he had helped. "Ma'am, you made it home," he said with a grin. "I'm so glad to see you again." Eleanor smiled, her heart lifting at his genuine happiness. "Yes, dear, I did, thanks to you." She walked closer, her elegant posture now betraying her true grace, though Malik still saw her as the same old woman who had needed help. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said softly. Malik shook his head. "You don't have to. I didn't do anything special." Eleanor studied him for a moment, noting the humility in his eyes, the way he brushed off gratitude as if it belonged to someone else. "Do you mind if I sit here for a moment?" she asked, and he quickly offered her a crate to sit on. She asked him about his work, his school, his dreams. Malik told her he wanted to finish his studies and maybe one day start a small repair shop for cars. He loved fixing things, finding beauty in broken parts. Eleanor listened quietly, realizing how different he was from the people she usually met. No greed, no hidden motives, just sincerity. They talked for almost an hour before she stood up to leave. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "Please take this," she said. Malik frowned, shaking his head immediately. "I can't, ma'am. I didn't help you for money." Eleanor smiled softly, almost tearfully. "I know you didn't. That's why you deserve it." He hesitated, but her eyes told him this meant something to her. Reluctantly, he accepted it, thanking her once again for visiting. When she left, Malik opened the envelope and found not cash, but a neatly folded letter with an address written on it. The note simply said, "Visit me when you can. There's something I'd like to show you." Confused but curious, Malik decided to go the next day after school. When he arrived at the address, he couldn't believe his eyes. The house wasn't a house, it was a mansion. Massive iron gates opened slowly as he approached, and a butler greeted him by name, as if expecting him. Malik walked through the grand hallway, his sneakers squeaking on the polished marble floor. He saw Eleanor sitting in an armchair by the fireplace, no longer dressed in her old, worn clothes. Instead, she wore a fine dress and pearls that shimmered under the light. For a moment, Malik was speechless. She smiled when she saw the realization in his eyes. "I suppose you've guessed by now," she said gently. "I wasn't really lost that day." Malik nodded slowly, still processing what was happening. "But why? Why were you dressed like that?" he asked. Eleanor looked at him with a calm sadness. "Because I wanted to see if the world still had people like you in it. I wanted to know if kindness existed without reward, and you showed me it does." Malik didn't know what to say. He had never been inside a place so grand, never spoken to someone so wealthy, yet the way she spoke to him made him feel as though he belonged there. They spent the next few hours talking again, this time about life, about how people forget compassion in the race for success. She told him about her late husband, how he used to stop for strangers on the road, and how she had lost that sense of connection after his passing. "You reminded me," she said softly, "that goodness is still real." As the evening settled in, Malik prepared to leave, still unaware that this meeting would lead to something extraordinary. He thanked her again for her kindness, saying he had to get home before his mother started worrying. Eleanor nodded with a gentle smile, watching him go. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt in her mansion full of riches hope. The following morning, Malik woke up thinking about the mansion, the grand halls, and the strange turn of fate that had led him there. His mind was still spinning from the revelation that the old woman he'd helped was actually Eleanor Grayson, a billionaire. The thought almost didn't feel real. He tried to push it aside as he got ready for school, tying his shoes and packing his books. His mother asked why he seemed distracted, but he simply said he had met someone interesting. Deep down, though, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. At the same time, Eleanor sat in her study, sipping tea and looking out the window at the sprawling gardens below. She had spent the night thinking about Malik, the boy who had stopped for her when no one else did. She had seen in him something she'd lost faith in long ago: selflessness, compassion, and integrity. Over the years, she had met countless people who wanted her attention, her money, or her power, but not one had treated her as a person rather than a name. Malik had done that without hesitation, without agenda. She knew she couldn't let this encounter fade away like another fleeting moment of kindness. She wanted to make a difference in his life, just as he had unknowingly done in hers. She called her lawyer and close friend, Mr. Carter, a man who had managed her affairs for decades. When he arrived, she explained everything that had happened, from her disguise on the city streets to Malik's simple act of humanity. Mr. Carter listened quietly, then nodded. "You've found something rare, Eleanor," he said softly. "Most people would have walked by, but he didn't. Perhaps it's time to reward that kind of heart." Eleanor smiled faintly, her decision already forming. Later that week, Malik received a formal letter in an envelope sealed with gold. His mother looked at it suspiciously, thinking it must be a mistake. But Malik recognized Eleanor's elegant handwriting. The letter invited them both to dinner at her home that Friday evening. His mother hesitated at first, unsure if it was appropriate, but Malik convinced her that the woman meant no harm. So, that evening, dressed in their best clothes, his mother in a modest dress and Malik in a neatly ironed shirt, they arrived at the mansion. The grand gates opened for them once again, and a butler guided them into a vast dining room filled with warm light and the scent of fresh flowers. Eleanor rose to greet them, her eyes kind and welcoming. "I'm so happy you came," she said warmly, shaking his mother's hand before turning to Malik with a smile. "It's good to see you again, young man." His mother thanked her for the invitation, still slightly overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding them. They sat down to dinner, and Eleanor made sure the atmosphere was comfortable, not formal. She asked Malik's mother about her work, about her children, and about their life. Throughout the evening, Malik noticed how genuinely interested Eleanor seemed in their story. She listened carefully, never interrupting, never judging. When the plates were cleared away, Eleanor folded her hands on the table and looked at Malik. "You may not realize it," she said softly, "but that day you helped me. You changed something in me. You reminded me that kindness still exists, that humanity hasn't completely disappeared." Malik looked down, embarrassed. I just did what anyone should have done, he murmured. Eleanor shook her head gently. No dear, you did what few would do. And for that, I owe you more than words. She stood and walked to a nearby cabinet, retrieving a folder. Placing it on the table in front of Malik, she opened it to reveal several documents. This, she said, is a scholarship fund in your name. It will cover your education, from high school through university, including housing, books, everything you need to build the future you dream of. Malik's mother gasped, covering her mouth in disbelief. Malik stared, unable to process what she was saying. Ma'am, I can't accept this, he stammered. Eleanor smiled kindly. You already earned it. This is not charity. This is gratitude. You gave me something that money cannot buy, a reason to believe in people again. Tears welled up in Malik's mother's eyes as she tried to thank her, her voice trembling. Eleanor waved her hand softly. Please, don't thank me. Your son did what no one else did, and I want him to have the life he deserves. She turned to Malik again. Promise me one thing, that you'll never lose that heart of yours. No matter how far you go or how much you gain. Malik nodded, still stunned, his throat too tight to speak. In the weeks that followed, everything began to change for Malik and his family. The scholarship papers were finalized, and soon after, Eleanor introduced them to people who helped renovate their small apartment and offered his mother a stable job managing one of Eleanor's charity offices. Life slowly transformed, not through luxury, but through opportunity. Malik kept studying, working hard, determined to honor the faith she had placed in him. Yet despite all the blessings, he never forgot that afternoon, the cold street, the map in her shaking hands, and the moment he decided to stop. Eleanor, on the other hand, found a new joy in her days. She began spending more time outside her mansion, walking in the parks, talking to strangers, supporting community projects quietly, without revealing her wealth. Malik often visited her after school, and their bond grew stronger. She treated him like the grandson she never had, and he treated her with respect and affection that went beyond gratitude. They would sit by the garden in the evenings, sipping tea and sharing stories. Eleanor often said that Malik had not only changed his own destiny, but hers too, because through him, she had rediscovered her purpose. Months passed, and word of Eleanor's mysterious generosity began to spread, though few knew the real story. To the world, she was simply a reclusive billionaire who had suddenly decided to help those in need. To Malik, she was the woman who had taught him that even the smallest act of kindness could ripple across lives in ways no one could predict. He continued his studies, always keeping her lessons close to his heart. One afternoon, as he visited her for their usual tea, Eleanor handed him an envelope. This is something I want you to open when the time is right, she said. Malik promised he would. She smiled, her eyes soft but distant, as if she knew time was slipping quietly away. A few months later, Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep. The news struck Malik deeply. She had become a part of his family, a figure of warmth and guidance he hadn't known he needed. When he finally opened the envelope, he found a handwritten letter, along with documents naming him as the inheritor of a foundation she had created. In her letter, she wrote, I leave this to you because I trust you will use it wisely to help those who are unseen, the ones the world walks past. Be the kindness that others fail to be. Tears filled his eyes as he read her words, realizing that her final gift wasn't just wealth, but purpose. Years later, Malik grew into a man respected for his compassion and integrity. He expanded Eleanor's foundation, turning it into a global effort to support education for underprivileged children. And whenever someone asked him why he cared so deeply, he always told the same story about an old woman lost in a city full of strangers, and the day he learned that helping someone find their way could also lead him to his own.